GPS
Right.
system.
There you go. There you go.
Hey, welcome. Back here in Florida. My name is Jay Frost, and as you may know already, I'm the host of the Philanthropy Mastermind series brought to you by DonorSearch, our friends who actually are in the next room that you can't see here at the resort, finishing up the Accordant leadership meeting right here at the hotel. But I have the opportunity to meet with a person whose work I've long admired and a friend in the industry, not just to myself, but to all of us who do fundraising, and that is Diana Sarro. And so I'll be introducing her to you in a moment, but I want to welcome you into this room with us. And also to welcome you to participate in this conversation, because even though we can't see or hear you, we do want to hear from you. So we have a couple ways to do that. In case you've never been through this before, I'm going to explain them to you now. If you've heard this before, cover your ears, or better yet, go to the chat right now and let us know that you're here with us. We would love to know. Just say where you're here from and maybe which organization you're with, and just it'll drive up that level of enthusiasm. We would love to see that in the chat. We also have over in the Q&A a place for you to list your questions, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of them today. So please do post questions in the Q&A so we won't miss them in the chat. As far as DonorSearch is concerned, we won't be talking about them today, at least I don't plan to. Diana may mention them in the context of her work, but that doesn't mean we don't love them. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk with now over 500 people since 2016 in sessions like this one. And so if you want to know more about any of this series, the webcasts, webinars, or podcasts that we do, you can find all that over at donorsearch.net. Another great place to also just learn about the donors who matter so much to us in our work. And with that, again, welcome. I want to thank so much to you for coming here, although I know you're right here in Jacksonville.
I know. Welcome to Florida, Jay.
Thank you.
It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you. And I don't necessarily want to read your bio, but may I just give a little introduction, and then you can just tell us more about
you. And thank you for doing this. This is wonderful, and I think it's wonderful to be able to share with other fundraisers what I've been up to and what's been working on our end, just so everybody can learn. And I've learned from the Mastermind series, the CFRE series. I've been watching at other fundraisers, so I do appreciate your work and all that you're doing, and of course all DonorSearch is doing by sponsoring this, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Diana, you have been working in the field for a while, but you began your career in broadcasting, so we're a little shy today. We want to make sure we do things right. But you worked in Norwalk, Connecticut, the place where I was born, actually, for a number of years in a one-person development shop before you embarked on this career with Save the Children, now going 17 years and going, where you've been in significant roles working with donors across the spectrum, but particularly in partnerships. I know over the last number of years, maybe 10 years, working in major and planned gifts of 7 figures and more. Is that about right?
Right.
Well,
7 figures, no more.
7 figures, no more.
We'll work on the 8 figures.
Well, we'll get there. So how did all that start? How did you move from that kind of environment where you're the whole thing to working in what is a relatively big team? In fact, maybe it's also, if you wouldn't mind kind of introducing Save the Children to people who may not know much about it.
Yeah, well, Save the Children is over 100 years old. We're an international humanitarian aid organization working all around the world. We're some of the ugliest places to be a child in the world, including right now in Syria, where they're recovering from the earthquake, in Turkey and everywhere, Yemen, you name it. And we're on the front lines with these children, helping them to have the very basic resources that they need. And also, help for the future development work to help them with education and other programs for their future. So it's very different from working being the one-man band in Norwalk, Connecticut, which is a wonderful organization that I worked for, that worked on really poverty in that city. It's an inner city program for kids who are in high school and elementary school and might not have a dad at home, and the single parent family, really getting them through high school and into college. And so that is a very good goal. And we doubled the size of their budget. We did all the work I could, but it was just a different goal with Save the Children. We're working to save a child's life. If they don't have a meal every day, they have a meal every other day. I can't even fathom, how children can survive like that, how they're stunted, how their brains literally cannot develop in circumstances like that. So the passion that comes out of me to raise funds for that is I mean, it's very electric. So I can connect with donors who also feel passionate about that, and we really can make transformational change. So that for me was the difference of, I can be passionate about local programs, but it just takes it to the next level when I've come back from Ethiopia and I've, heard the stories from grandparents who can't feed their children. It's heartbreaking, and it's like, it just drives you to want to do more. So yeah, and kudos to Save the Children for giving opportunities to staff to go out and see the work and actually do, temporary duty assignments. I've helped with the Afghan refugees when they're coming over last September, or actually September 21, when they were coming over as the Taliban took over and they were fleeing for their lives, and just the impact of meeting the women that have come over, being beaten on the way to the airport from the Taliban that are lucky to be alive, and just the difference we could make to their children is just, it's, heartbreaking. It's, it had us all in tears, and it just drives us to do more, to make change. So it, yeah, it's a very different dynamic.
And Save the Children really does work everywhere, because
Yeah.
I know back in the day, at least, there was also a strong US program, and that's still true today. So this issue about, children being vulnerable, whatever that vulnerability is a global problem.
Right.
And I know we're going to talk about fundraising, but I maybe to start with, when it comes to trying to figure out where to focus the attention of an organization that large, and I know you have affiliates, partner organizations throughout the world, but how do you know where to go? I mean, with Turkey, it's one thing, right? I mean, there's a major earthquake. You have to be there. In fact, you have staff already in the ground in Syria. But for the rest of the world, I mean, even a place as big as Save, you can't be everywhere. How do you determine where to go and what to do?
Yeah, well, we have regional experts, certainly global experts. We have Save the Children International now that really works on these issues and looks at, where is there available funding, what are the needs on the ground, and what is it that where we can add value and not just duplicate what's being done, because we never want to do that. We want to be as most effective and efficient as possible on the ground for children. And there's very dangerous places that where we may not be able to get the traction or access. So, are we better off shifting funds to an area where we could do more and make more of a difference, where we can get traction? So it's really interesting how the teams come up with this and how they do go decisions. So, and everything a donor may have an idea they want to do, it has to be run through, our teams to say, is this something that aligns with our programs and our interests, and not just, the tail wagging the dog. So we did a lot of that in the past, and we would, jump, stand on our heads to get support to come in because we wanted the support. But now it's really, we need to be most effective with our funds, and does this align with where the need is greatest? And that also benefits the donor, because we don't want to spend excessive amounts of time on things that aren't going to be quite, making the impact that we could be making if we did it the way, need to. So it's a partnership. It's always a collaboration. So, but definitely, we have experts on the ground that are making calls, that know the situation locally, and work through from the ground up, from the local partners on the ground to the country office level, to the regional level, to the global center, and they're making decisions every day.
And this is both emergency and non-emergency development, right? So it's a very broad range.
Sure. And as grants wind down, if there's no funding, what do we do? What's going to happen to this? Leaving impact areas where we've made change. Sometimes that's heartbreaking to a donor who's built a school in that area and would like to see it continue, but it's not, if we've made the change that we need to make there, and that's the right thing to do, so we can affect another area, we have to turn and change.
Well, but I guess also then you've established some infrastructure, especially local infrastructure. So it's not as if Save the Children does something and then you abandon the ship. I mean, it's just there are other people now who have the skill and hopefully the resources, including local resources, to continue the development.
Right, that's the goal.
Right.
The sustainability on the ground, teaching governments that this is a better way of how to use your own budget. So it's not Save the Children providing that, it's now local governments being able to provide for their own people.
There's a lot of dynamism in you just described. So one part is the dynamic internally, where some programs, I guess it's a matter of, you're probably trying to figure out, how do we get a certain percentage or something of a population into a school, like making sure there's education for girls and wherever, and they need everything to do that, whether it's transportation or food or uniforms. In many cases, I know in the past that was an issue. So these kinds of things, overcoming those obstacles, and so that's the sustainability portion before, say, the children kind of then passes the baton. But then you also have something that happens like yesterday, and so when you have these discussions, it must make it really challenging for fundraising, because I know we can be nimble, but we also have to bring our donors along with us, or maybe even discover donors who don't know about it. So Turkey is perhaps an example of this. Without getting into the weeds of it, when you have an emergency like this, and there are now there are over 10,000 that they know are deceased, right? 11,000, and then we don't really know the total number or the total number affected. This means that you can talk to, say, the children's existing donors, people who have expressed an interest in that region or this kind of activity in the past, but maybe you're also looking for new donors. How do you go from talking with program staff to figuring out that's what you want to do, to talking to donors who may understand it or may not, and talking to them and kind of helping them to understand it, see if they're interested in supporting it, to talking to people who know nothing about it?
About SAVE.
About SAVE or the program, in that particular region.
Well, really, we work with an existing donor base. As a major gift officer, we have our existing folks that we're talking to. And because we're in these conversations already about other programs, we can say, hey, thought you might like to know we are on the ground there responding. And really, it's in part thanks to them, because if they're supporting our mission, that's the initial funding that got us going to surge in staff. We have teams on the ground there, but even if they aren't supporting Syria per se, that mission support really allowed us to start the effort to go tell our teams, go ahead and respond. We have money for this. So I'm thanking donors for being a part of that by supporting our mission in general, and then inviting them to get closer to it. We're having a briefing call on Friday for donors. So inviting them to get closer, and and then not a lot of prospecting, so much anymore, because now we do have an established portfolio of donors. So that comes along with research, will give us some prospects to work with, and that takes a lot more time. So when an emergency happens like this, it's like all hands on deck. Your plans for the week are gone. You just have to wipe them away. And it becomes initial outreach to those that already know us and care about us, who are most likely to then support the effort. The prospects we can reach out to gently, but it's not the same tailored response that we would give to a
that must be kind of a longer timeline too, even in an urgent situation, because they have to you have to build the trust, I guess, with new prospects. But you have a massive, at least you used to have this massive database of donors, and there's much more. I don't like to talk about donors as numbers, but I'm just trying to understand it. So how many donors are we talking about that SAVE might currently have? Can you
I can't even tell you that anymore. I'm not on that side of it anymore, but certainly in Florida we have a good number of donors that I'm getting to know more and more, and it's I love it. I love connecting with people, and I'm working on ways to say, hey, I'm your advisor now. It's not a fundraiser, like, hey, I'm knocking on your door as a fundraiser. Hi, we'd like more money. It's no, I want to understand you. I want to understand your philanthropic goals, and really walk alongside you in this journey so you can best reach those goals. So that's more of where I'm coming from now, working with new prospects and trying to really see where they are in their journey and where would they like to be, and being a resource to them. So that's kind of a shift that I've seen happen. Even at SAVE, they've given us new titles. So now my title
I was going to ask about that.
Senior advisor. And I love that, because that means I'm shoulder to shoulder with the supporter, not in a top-down way where I'm, trying to come at them.
Right, you're not just asking for something, you're partnering with them to do something.
And in the past, I think it was very different. The culture was very different. It was more of a, we need to, it didn't feel more relational. Now we have a wonderful team in place, and it very much gives us the leeway to build relationships versus go to the well often and often and often. So it's really respectful of them, donors.
And I'm hearing this discussion about language a lot. And where do you think that's coming from? Where did it come from at Save the Children? Because, and maybe, when did you make that evolution personally? Because this has been a big thing for you. It's about personal relationships. It's not just transactions here.
Yeah, well, I've always felt that way, where I push back, where you can't just continue to ask, major gifts, it's maybe an 18-month cycle. So you
Right.
can't continue to every single thing go to a donor and ask them to support it. It's what's important to them. We have to always have a donor-centric look at it and an agency-centric look at it. I've pushed for that for years. I think, Penelope Burke years ago, I think, we had her in, and Tom Ahern, looking at language, but it's more than language. It's with the relationship. And recently we have a nudge unit at Save the Children that helps, with it, called Cubic. So that helps with, in programmatic ways, how do we nudge, parents to do XYZ for their children, say, continue breastfeeding, things like that. But the nudge unit also did a course to help with behavioral science, and using that to look at, what are some of the challenges we have. And some of the challenges I recognize is, I do approach new supporters that, come into my portfolio a certain way, and some of them don't respond, and I never hear from them. And I'm saying, well, what can I be doing differently? And when I really took a look at how I would typically approach them and flipped it, and making it an incentive for them, here, I'm a resource for you. I want to understand you and your philanthropic goals, and really, put it on, this is an opportunity for you to, to tell me what you want to hear from us, and how you want to hear it. And not just, I have so much in my head I have to share with you about this agency. We're awesome. You're going to want to help us more. That doesn't work. No. And that's the approach, I think, that comes from, a lot of our scarcity mindset in the previous role, where I was the one person shop, and we just want to tell them everything about everything, because every donor at every level we have to, treat the same way. And that doesn't work. So it's, a blend of, having to tier, our portfolios, and really understand 75% of our giving comes from 10 or 12 people, at least in my portfolio.
Sure.
So really looking at that and making sure I am a ready resource for them, and I'm constantly thinking about them and what they need and what they want to see and hear, and really, and then going down from there and the various other pieces of the portfolio.
Something that occurred when you were talking about this is that these donors are probably, I'm not assuming what people know and don't know, but just that if you're working with them regularly and you're sharing information, maybe they're also the kind of just naturally curious people who want to see impact in what they do in their life, including their philanthropy. And so if something is happening somewhere, Afghanistan or something, or Ethiopia, and when you reach out to them, and I'd love to hear about the different ways that you reach out to different sorts of people, but when you reach out to them, are they kind of already there with you? And are in some cases, are they nudging you? Are they calling you and saying, so what's going on in Turkey? I mean, what is that dynamic like?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, we have CEOs, and then we have, grandmothers. So, or both. But it's learning, how to approach them is basically, what do they want? What's their time commitment? How invested are they? Is this something that they do because it makes them feel good? Or is this something they want to learn more about, and so they want to devote the time to meet a program officer or a CEO, and, when can I arrange that, via Zoom, which is great since COVID. Zoom has been the go-to now of a lot of meetings but even just approaching CEOs now, just saying, hey, do you have a quick 15 minutes? That's all I need, just to establish a first dialogue with them. I mean, and we can build on that after time goes, but it's like having that first rapport with them is important, I think, to start the relationship, and then building on it from there. So, and not all donors will have the same amount of time. Some folks will be able to do an hour-long call or a meeting over lunch, but it really depends on the level of interest, and if they're a Syrian national versus somebody who just cares about people of Syria. So they'll have far more detailed questions, but we have oodles of resources now at SAVE, being that we're Save the Children International, so we have a donor call happening with regional staff on the ground on Friday, which is a great opportunity to be able to share with supporters versus just a paper brief that we can,
Oh, so you're also inviting all these supporters into calls like that. So you're giving them a briefing from the program perspective.
Right. So a behind the scenes look at what's happening on the ground, so they can really feel close.
How are they responding to that?
Again, it
depends.
It's agency centric. So if you think about, we need you here at 11 o'clock on Friday, and their schedule is not permitting for that. Do they have an hour to spare? So really, it's about the recording. And so taking that recording after the fact and then following up on questions, I think the invitation goes a long way, and having that access is something that they know other donors might not have. So I think that goes a long way. But again, not being agency centric, that we need you there at this specific time is something we still have to learn, I believe.
Sure. So it's, in other words, it's not about us. It's about you,
it's
right?
about them.
It's the because of you principle. The
Yes.
old Jerry Bennis boy,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
because of you.
Yeah. Exactly.
I know that in the past at Save the Children, there are a whole bunch of things historically that are probably, some of which are still done, or other ones that have evolved.
Yeah.
That you and your colleagues have been evolving.
Yeah.
And one of those was, I'm trying to think of which order. One of them, of course, was the sponsorship program, which is probably still pretty key at Save the Children. Do you mind sharing what that is and where that fits in the spectrum of development and relationships with donors? Because not many organizations have a vehicle like that, sort of bring people in, let them grow. It may not fit for everybody.
Save the Children started the sponsorship program. Oh God, I don't even know what year, but many years ago, which then other organizations have picked up and used to this day. So that's sponsoring a child for $39 a month, a child in Nepal or wherever, and that is a representative child of a community. So the funding will support the education, the water and sanitation work, just basic needs of that child in that community, of that community. And the representative child photo that comes to you, and you can write letters and all. Very, very costly program, but it does help us acquire new donors. And so I've had 7-figure donors come in that started as a sponsor. I mean, on a routine, another 6-figure donor that just came in as a sponsor that I just met with last year, and has grown since then. And that's what I always say, like, you never know who's in your database that start as a sponsor.
Sure.
And become something far more, which is the value of research. Also being able to flag of these sponsors. Don't just look at their last gift. If we know they're giving large gifts somewhere else, it's pretty good to think that they could do it to give us.
And $39 a month, it does add up, but it's also achievable for most, or for many, for many people. But it's a doorway in, and then there's all this engagement throughout the path, throughout the year.
Yeah, and it's an evolving program now, where we're looking to do something called Team Tomorrow, which is something that is going to be tied into our undesignated funding, asking people to make reoccurring gifts, and then providing them some thematic content on the area they designate of interest, whether it's climate or education, being able to tailor the communication based on what we're doing in those areas, but really tying into undesignated support. So that is still in its infancy, but sponsorship is a wonderful platform where donors can come in and really have that connection. So I do appreciate that we have that and have started that. So it's a gold mine, I think, to find other support. I mean, deeper levels of support, through places like DonorSearch and others.
And then I guess you can take that all the way through. And there are many things that you and everyone else at SAVE has done and does today, but that goes all the way through. You just mentioned these calls where you can talk to program staff. But I know one other thing that SAVE had done in the past was have these visits to countries where a small number of people would go and visit the program in the field. And that was both really profound experience for people, at least that's what I've heard. But it was also very, it was a great way to invite people to give in a substantial level. Is that still going on today? And where does that fit? I mean, from in that spectrum.
Well, thank God, after COVID, we had to put a freeze on all this, and it really limited us. But now, visits are happening, and we have folks going out to Ethiopia soon. We have other visits to Colombia and whatnot. But also, it really kind of encapsulates what we do. That visit, those 2 days or 3 days or whatever they're spending in the field, it really brings to life what the project is that they're doing. So, case in point, I had a sponsor that had never been met with by anybody at SAVE, that I met with as I came into Florida. It's wonderful that I'm the first fundraiser based in Florida for Save the Children. So now, so now there's so many people here.
There are a lot of people in Florida, I'm sure.
That are dying to meet with somebody to say,
Right.
wow, I'd love to hear more about your work. So this particular sponsor was flagged for us, and she says, I've been meaning to do something in this particular area. And I said, oh, perfect. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And so we, went on from there and had a call with the program team. And she funded it for 1 year and said, I just want to see what the results are. And then we'll talk about future
Okay.
funding. So
Sure.
before the next report came out, hey, would you like to go visit and see the impact you've made? Of course, yes, yes. So we go to the field, and it's better than you can imagine. The resilience of the staff and what they've been through, it's phenomenal. And she has a great visit and commits for multiple more years for funding. And it really makes the difference to meet the children that you're impacting and know that it's their future that's going to change forever. It's amazing. So, and it could be, at the point of, stewarding them, reporting back, this is how your gift has made a difference, or, right before they're, securing, a gift for the project. So it depends on the donor journey. And also, it's good to see something though. So if they're supporting something, and then you can actually physically show them, okay, well, here's what we've done. I think that's always better than going in and saying, here's what we could do. So that, personally, but the evolution has been phenomenal for me to see that how we're doing more visits. And since COVID, everything has changed back to normal somewhat, but also having this hybrid COVID, Zoom world. So
Sure.
now we're talking about, well, is there anything we could do in Ethiopia to actually be able to zoom in the people that couldn't make the trip? And
Sure.
I don't know if that's technically possible now, but at least we're asking the questions.
Right. Well, I've heard about Charity Water showing the well or something like that. So there's some things, but it's not the same as, walking around after getting off the helicopter in Nepal or something, and it's totally different. Speaking of Zoom, since we're here on Zoom, I want to make sure that if there are questions that have popped in, that I do acknowledge them. So if you do have a question, I want to encourage you to go ahead and pop it in the question. I'm not able to read the chat and the questions at the same time, much to the consternation of my producer. But I do want to make sure that you can be a part of this conversation. I know we had something from Dee Dee earlier asking if the range and size of gift opportunities in the portfolio. Let me see. Wondering about the range of gift size opportunity in your portfolio, with a follow-up of how many donors or prospects you generally have in your portfolio. And I know this is a common question about size. Part of this is also defined by the market, what you're trying to talk to people about, how long people have been with you, but also your position with the organization. How many people are you kind of actively managing, if you want to use that term, or is that the right term?
Yeah, that's the right term. It's it's an ebb and flow. We have a twice annual process where we reevaluate our portfolio and say, okay, well, how long has it been that they've been in? How are they responding? Are you building a relationship, getting anywhere? If not, then we will transition them in a different way to whether it's somebody else working on a different portfolio in the same in that particular region they're living in. So for myself, I'm transitioning into Florida mainly because I've moved here. So my previous geographic region, I still carry some folks that I'm working with, other folks not so much. But it's looking at that transition twice a year helps, but also as new folks come in, I'm constantly getting, after Ukraine, we saw a number of folks come in brand new to the organization. Right. So it's the ability to work with them, and that kind of offsets the ones that we're transitioning out. So it's, 150 is that magic, we can't go further than that. But I say also with new donors, it takes so much more time to get to know them and really build those relationships that if I have many more new donors, I'd probably feel more comfortable with fewer. But and if you have grants under management too, so we're doing multiple, 6 or 7 figure grants that we're working through. So that takes a lot of time. So a smaller portfolio, when you have that, would be always ideal.
This is what I'm hearing a lot from people, and it seems like there are two tensions within fundraising in general, and you must be feeling them on an order of magnitude with Save the Children, because so many people are care about children, and then they trust Save the Children as a place to support children around the world. And one is smaller portfolios, more focused, seems to lead to larger gifts, better opportunities for people to invest and see impact. But it also provides this additional challenge, which is then you have all these other people whose heart is with you, and how do you reach out to them? And you just mentioned you're the first person to do this work here in Florida, and I can only imagine when you've called these people up for the first time, that must be a big deal for you and for them, because there's never been any Floridian outreach, right?
Well, I mean, we parachute in. I mean, being we were centrally located in Connecticut, our fundraising team.
Sure.
I don't know, I think it was 8 or so or more years ago, we started a West Coast. We have now fundraisers on the West Coast, but never in Florida. So to be able to say that I'm just right down the street in Jacksonville or wherever, it
makes a difference.
It makes a difference. Yeah, you're going through the hurricane. How are you? Over here in Jacksonville, this happened. So I think it makes a real difference to have that proximity with them. But I'd rather.
No, well, I guess that's the main thing is if you're trying to have that smaller and more effective kind of work, then it also presents that twin challenge about all those other people, whether they're in Florida or elsewhere. How in the world do you maintain that? Is that something that Save the Children has been able to make sure that you have the space and the time to really focus on those deep relationships while also managing this growing volume of other people?
Yeah, I think, well, it works well because I still do head up to Connecticut quite a bit. So I am in the New England area. My family's up there. So I will head up there quite a bit. So, but I think relationship trumps most everything. That's what we've gone to with our leadership is great. And they've been really understanding about that they don't want to jeopardize a relationship by trying to transfer a supporter into somebody else's portfolio that they've never known. And so you could jeopardize especially if you're looking at, a larger gift, in the near future. So we try not to do that. But I've built a lot of relationships that are over, 10, 15 years. And it's hard to really be able to, pivot and say, I think you're best served by somebody, more locally. And so that does, break my heart a bit to have those conversations. But at times, what's best for them, not just, what's best for me and what my work is, but I really am looking at, the donor and, if they are already in touch with another one of my colleagues and they are local to them, it does make sense. So I think a lot of that has changed. I'd say if we, it's less territorial for us as a team. We have great leadership, and so the team is not. We share materials amongst each other. It's okay to to staff a meeting with another fundraiser's donor. We're not territorial anymore, and it used to be very different at Save. I think that was prior leadership. It was really a challenge, but now it's a lot more team focused, and we're really, together in this, trying to share materials. Who's got a great email for the turkey response? What can we, learn from each other about how you're approaching this? Who's got a great, asset that we can share with donors? So I think that's changed too. So it's easier to make those shifts, but heartbreaking to, we stay in touch. I always invite people to come to Florida and visit. So
how many people are saying no to that? I mean, it's
no, and a lot of my donors from up in the north actually have homes or travel to Florida, so it is easy to kind of catch them when I can.
Right,
so.
Snowbirds.
Yeah.
Snowbirds.
Yeah.
And we do have another question from Chelsea, who had asked, thank you, Chelsea, how to maintain relationships with donors who are considered major donors. And again, these are our internal terms, obviously not the terms we use with our donors, but now that you have grown, and they're now considered mid-level donors, but maybe are they, what about the personal touch?
Yeah.
How do you make that shift personally, now that you're working with these 7-figure donors?
Well, working at both levels, you mean both?
Yes, the people who are kind of whatever mid-level means.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, it just, you want to treat them all with kindness and respect and answer their questions and what they have. I mean, it's how much time do you have in the day is when it comes down to it. So I have my top 10, top 12 folks that really are resulting in, significant giving for Save the Children. And I am most in touch with them. And then, the next folks, so I kind of tier it, the level of, time that I have to work with them. But really, the messaging is pretty much the same, as personal as I can. I may not have the frequency with folks that are giving on the other end of the spectrum, but I'm thinking of them.
Right.
Always thinking of them, and inviting them to different things and to participate. So I may not have as much time for, as many outreaches for coffee, but I'm always, available if somebody, has a question. So I don't know if that helps, or exactly what your question was, Chelsea.
Well, yes, if you have a follow-up to that, I'm sure we can address
Yeah.
it, but thank you, Chelsea. And again, if you have other questions on any of these issues, we can dive into them. I do want to make sure that I tackle what was in the titling, which was long and powerful. And so we talked about mastering major gifts, and of course, we've been talking about that, about the kind of work that you're doing now, your portfolio size, these relationships you manage. We haven't talked a lot about retention, which I want to get back to with you, because clearly that's working because of what you're doing. And that's why the focus on that versus just more acquisition. But there is a subtitle here in the session, which is how to persist in the face of no, shift your focus to the donor, which you talked a bit about, and using research to make the difference. First, that idea about how to persist in the face of no. And there have been sessions, even at this conference I'm attending, where that's always the question. And people's reluctance to go and ask because they're afraid of the word no. You work with this well-defined group of people who are very committed to the work that SAVE does. But you probably still hear no when you go and talk to them about particular projects. It doesn't mean they don't love you. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. When do you encounter no? How do you deal with it?
Well, and it is jarring to hear something that you think is a yes, and then you get that answer, and it's like it takes the air out of you, like,
yes.
Oh, and it's what we do as individuals. We take things personally, rejection. No,
Sure.
I mean, we tend to.
Yes.
We can as individuals, but as fundraisers, we have to realize it's not about us. It's really about, the offer. This, whatever we've offered them is not the right fit right now.
Right.
It could be the timing, it could be the offer, and it's not no to the agency. It's a no to this particular offer. So we tend to, sometimes have pity parties a little bit, but then you circle the wagons and you say, okay, because I do have an instance where I was able to turn a no back into a 7-figure gift. So it's not giving up at that point and saying, this donor, they're out, they're not going to give ever.
Can you talk a bit about that turnaround? I mean, how did you do? What happened? How did you do that?
Well, it was a lengthy process of getting to know a new donor, basically, to the agency. That you get this phone call out of the blue saying, "Oh, we'd love to give you $1 million." Well, yippee skippy. Okay, well, let's get to know you, and how would you like to spend it?
Right.
And so, hearing what their interests are, aligning with them, and we had, day-long meetings with our program experts in the areas we thought that was of interest to them. We developed, really robust proposals that aligned with their interest, we believe. But the thing is, we're working with an advisor here. So the advisor's telling us, this is what we believe, the interest is of the donors. And so we do all of this work, and then nothing, crickets, months and months and months go by. We don't know what's happening. We don't get any.
Right.
So then finally, we hear from them and they say, okay, well, we're going to focus on this one proposal, but we're going to give you half as much. Okay. So it's just, it's an evolution of, okay, so now let's give you another full day with the field, getting even deeper with the program experts. But again, we're working with the advisor. So, we're, months and more months go by, and we're like, okay, we need to kind of close this now. So we're coming down to visit with the donor. Now in front of the donor with the advisor, we actually secured a meeting with our CEO, and we're hoping to finally close the gift. And we weren't able to on the spot, but afterwards we have an invitation to a phone call. Phone call is from the advisor. It's not the right fit. So that's where it's the gut punch of like, all year we spent on this.
Plus, it's not just your time. Now the CEO's involved, and you're probably feeling that pressure, right?
Yeah, and it's a letdown for the field because so many folks were relying on this, like saying, okay, we're expecting this, because now we've whittled down to this one proposal, and there's people, there are programs that are at stake now. So, okay, so now it's thinking, oh, what could I have done different? And it's so our general proclivity is to take it on ourselves, and it's hold the wagon, don't do that. So I kind of was able to realize, this donor spent this time actually not the donor, this advisor spent this time with us and is invested in this organization. So what's to say that, something else couldn't come before them that is more in line? So I was able to, really, really realize that, we haven't involved the donor in any of this. And we had dinner with that donor. He gave me his business card. I did not reach out to him directly. I was trying not to step on toes, but I changed the approach. After the no, I said, you know what? I need to be in touch with that donor directly and find out what they really want to give to, because they're still
that's really
giving.
interesting.
They're still supporting SAFE in other ways, but just not to these larger asks. So we circled the wagon with the CEO, got back down on the plane, back to the donor, and let's have another dinner and get to hear more about you and what your real interests are.
Sure.
And just kept the door open. Like, we'd love to have you travel to see programs and really experience what our work is. And they took us up on it, and we planned a trip for them as they were already headed out to Africa. And what I did was actually not just have the country team prepare a robust itinerary of everything we do. Of the things we knew they were interested in, I created 3 different itineraries so they could self-select what is it that they're interested in and want to learn more about, because that could be in line with what we go towards for a proposal. This time, they picked the program they wanted to see, they saw it, they went in deep, and they were there with the country director, and during the visit, they're co-creating what the proposal would be. So, these women need this, let's do this. So it was very crystal clear exactly what the donor wanted to do. And this is when we got right to the donor, getting them to the field, getting them to see our work. And we kind of lost the kind of telephone that we were playing with through the advisor, just to have that as close as you can to the donor, have that experience so they could go to the field, or they can be on calls with us. It made the difference night and day. So then we were getting their questions directly and answering them directly, and understanding what the needs were on their end, or what they wanted to see in the proposal. And at the end of the day, after the trip, they said this was the best proposal they've ever seen from any organization, and fully funded it, and then encouraged other supporters to jump on board. So now we're about to do that again, and in second iteration, and it's gone well from there. But it's really not taking it personal and getting as close to the donor as you can. I mean, some advisors, it works differently. It's a very good relationship, but with this particular one, I think we were playing telephone, and so we lost a year.
And I'm sure that as people are listening to this, they might be thinking everything from, well, how do we get to know the advisor? That's a question I've heard a lot too. What kind of advisor are you talking about? So without obviously giving too much detail, are we talking about financial advisors here? Are we talking about business advisors? And is it kind of a different script, or a different kind of interaction with different personalities depending upon their relationship to the donors?
Yeah, that's true. This was hired by the donor couple to manage their foundation.
Okay, so this is a person who is legitimately interested in, their philanthropy. Yes.
Potentially may not have been as closely aligned with what the donor was interested in as.
Right. Well, I wonder, as you were telling this story, I was thinking, did the principal, the donor, were they even aware of all these different things that you had to do in order to, before you had that visit?
As far as they had multiple
and all the multiple conversations with the advisor that were getting you to do all these different things.
A good question. But in the end, all that matters is the program that's on the ground now making a huge difference for women, and it's phenomenal results. So it's worth it, I guess. I mean, it is a long and arduous journey, but it is worth it in the end for the difference that we're making. So
right. And you talked earlier about how some of these donors might come in as a sponsor, maybe even a single gift to an emergency, because I know that happens. So a donor like this one you've just described, have you seen instances like that where it starts like that? It's just something, and then
that's how they started, in fact, as sponsors. So, but also, another example, not taking no, not respectfully taking no, but also saying yes, but would be with the Ukraine situation. We get a lot of emergency donors every time there's an emergency that come in, and we really, they say, oh no, this is a one-time gift, I'm just doing it for this emergency, and I had a supporter who was, flagged by our research team to say, they have a little bit more capacity, so you may want to pay more attention to them. So I did. So as they, told us that, I said, okay, what can I do to really steward them well on this particular gift so they really understand the impact that they're making? So I went, the extra mile in that regard, and had our board chair reach out to them. This was a CEO, so having a CEO to CEO outreach to thank them, and he reiterated that this is just a kind of a one-time thing. Our interests lie in X and Z, and then of course our board chair is like, well, we do X and Z. So I quickly follow up with, okay, well, here's what we do in this area, and here's what we do in this area, and they didn't quite get back to me right away, so that's fine too. Just kept stewarding them at high level, different conversations with COOs. With Save and podcasts and things, just sending them their way. And finally they said, you're very persistent. And so
obviously that was a positive thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're like, we'd love to have a conversation about how we can support Save the Children. And we have some ideas and we'd like to have a call with you. So with that, music to my ears. So I said, okay, well, can we invite somebody on our, humanitarian team to be on the call? And they said, well, let's schedule this after we come back from our international trip. Oh, you're going internationally. Where are you going? Perhaps we can schedule a visit to our programs. Mm-hmm. So they knew that we were that vested in them, that we would drop everything and try and arrange a visit so that they had access. And I think they really knew, I'm really interested in getting them to understand our programs are enough for me to understand them and what they're interested in.
Right.
So they then made a lovely 6-figure gift. A second gift after they're only going to make a one-time gift. And then at the conversation, they really appreciated the fact that I was trying to take the time to also get to know them and their interests, and said, we just trust you and want to support you generally, just so you can do the good work that you're doing. So then they offered support for our emergency room more generally. And we're working on another conversation now so they can learn about other work that we do. And so it's just, if I had taken that as a brush off, goodbye, right. We wouldn't be in this situation. But also, if we didn't have the research, and the key is the research, like telling us, this is somebody that gives it, greater capacity to other organizations, and having their current email and their current cell phone. If I didn't have a way to reach them, then we wouldn't be talking about another gift.
Sure.
Because snail mail solicitations, I don't know how effective they are compared to being able to steward them over, quick emails or phone calls. Right. So it just makes such a difference to have that. So that could be some of the reasons why some of the portfolio doesn't respond, because we're just not, we're not reaching them in the right way. Yeah. So we don't know if some of these contact informations are correct or not. But
there are at least a couple pieces in there that are so interesting to dive into. And one is, you've mentioned this thing about the research being important. And it sounds like you mean both the tools and the people. So you mentioned people in the research department at Save the Children. And I don't know what that looks like today, because it's changed over time. But you have a number of people who are in your research department who are just doing prospect research and
about 3 folks.
3 folks there, which is actually not huge for a big organization. I mean, it's not like Harvard's development team, but they're obviously key to doing this, and for capacity, but also for contact data, but the way you said it, it sounds like a partnership again, that even internally. So they're saying, well, I think that there's an opportunity here, and you listened. That's not true everywhere between the front line and the CEO and the research team. It's often, there's kind of like this kind of communication going on. It sounds like you're really working well together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're embedded in the individual philanthropy team.
Okay.
So that's what helps us to really work closely together. And they love hearing the wins like this, and how it made a difference that they went the extra mile to fund that evening with us. And we were able to reach out, and this is what resulted, for children. So we're all very passionate about the mission. So it's great to have that. And and it's also an investment of the organization to understand the value of it that it brings, the research brings versus, I can't speak, highly enough about our research team. So.
If they're listening, I'm sure they appreciate that, because research teams don't always get praised. And they need to be well resourced, and clearly they have the resources. We're not getting into specifics of what you're using there, but obviously it's a good thing. There's another part of the story which I found really interesting, which is that this one and the other example you gave, it both sounded like at a certain point, this was really, from the donor's perspective, it sounds very collaborative, meaning that they must have felt like they were co-authoring what they were going to invest in and what the result would be. It wasn't just that you had an idea or program had an idea, but there was a meeting in the field in the one example, and the next one there were all these iterations, and then you came, and so it was sort of like, yeah, we're going to do this together. This isn't something like, here's a menu of options and pick one. That's a very different sort of dynamic, isn't it? I mean, was it like that for you now, if you can go back in your mind 15, 20 years to today? Was it like that?
It's kind of a one size fits all back in the day. Where this is, here's your choice. You want to do this or this. And
do that.
Yeah, but again, there are also times where we stand on our head and try and do whatever it takes to get the donation. So,
and that's not so great either.
No, because that's a lot of extra work for the agency. That may not be a program that even aligns with what we do. So now we've been good about having boundaries and really not accepting money that doesn't fit for our programs, because in the field, they may not be able to program it. And they say, well, we don't do that. We're not the experts in that. Why would we do that? So even though the donor has the idea that they think would be the best, it may not be.
So can you talk about that just a little bit? Because when you are really engaged with donors, but it's a nice, balanced, healthy relationship, people will have all their ideas, just like in a marriage or anything else, right? Some person says, I want to go to Florida, somebody else wants to go to Hawaii. So when you talk about that with the donor and they have another idea, what do you do to help them?
Let's try to redirect it and help them to understand why we aren't the best at that and how resources could be most effective. There's a lot of different areas that could apply to, but it's, I mean, we want to add value wherever we are. We don't want to be, just duplicative. So this is why, like, we're not in urban America. I mean, there was a lot of resources in urban America to help the poverty in the US, but we're in rural America because there are no resources. There are no programs for kids after school and in many places, or public transportation to get to programs. So it's, SAVE may be the only option to give kids the help that they need. So it's, so things like that, helping them to understand the fuller picture and why we made that decision as an agency typically. So but also it's, keying in on that, are there other pieces we can attract them to versus what we're doing, if it's not there, maybe there's something else of interest to them. So keeping it open mind though, but
you're still pretty juiced by all this. I mean, you've been doing this a while. But your energy level is clearly very high still, right? And so what keeps it going for you? And the reason I ask this isn't so much about SAVE, but it's about the nature of what SAVE does and what you have to process personally, and then in order to share it with others. So we just talked about several instances. Ethiopia, what happened with the earthquake, what's been happening in Afghanistan. There are at least a dozen more things you could probably mention without thinking of things that you've directly encountered over the past decade. Each time it requires not just the energy and the interest in solving that problem through SAVE with a partner, but it's also the emotional energy of being able to process what's happened to kids somewhere, then being able to turn that into a story that helps other people see that they can make a positive impact. How do you keep yourself going in the face of that?
It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. It's the children. It's going to the field. It's understanding the stories if we can't go to the field. There's things that are just heartbreaking to understand and hear from our colleagues in the field, stories that we hear. I remember in Yemen when there was a school bus that was bombed, and I just couldn't understand how that like shook me. So I was really very passionate about just supporting Yemen at that point and sharing, it's hard to even put into words that, but it's understanding what these kids live through and just articulating their story, because they can't tell their story. These parents can't go out and fundraise for themselves and their children. So going to Ethiopia, understanding how these children are living, and then taking that back to donors and being their mouthpiece, basically to raise that funds. It's important to me because I know that these kids won't have any opportunity if it's not for SAVE or another NGO, they may not have anything. So an opportunity to ever become educated, to have a better life, to have clean water. I mean, just to go there and to see a child, picking a water bottle that somebody had dropped, some tourist had dropped, and filling it in a local river. And it's like this yellow, brownish, murky water, and that's what they're drinking. And I'm like, oh my God, should I give them my water bottle, or will they know that's what clean water looks like? I mean, I in that instance, it's like, those are the things that I take away and say, oh, we have to do something. So what can we do to bring them clean water, and take that example of what I saw and share it with other people? Because some folks don't have any concept of what people are living like in other areas of the world. And it's, what do you mean they don't have electricity? What do you mean that they're sleeping on the dirt floor? I mean, yes, that's the developing world today still, in this, this year that we're living in. So it's the more I can go to the field, I think that really energizes me. Doing these short-term assignments where, like helping the Afghan refugees when they were coming back from, and they were coming into Fort Bliss, that was very energizing to really be able to, champion that and fight for them. And but yeah, it is a balance of, you want to learn and you want to know and understand and articulate it out to donors, but also, yeah, it can be heavy at times. I mean, I know coming back from Fort Bliss, there were many tears just trying to process everything that I've seen there. And yeah, but it was worth it. I mean, well worth it to be able to be there for the children there and welcome them into the country and really provide a safe space for them while I was there. But yeah, it's every day understanding, and it's an education every day. I mean, I say I'm an inch deep and a mile wide about so many things. Sure. We're in 120 countries, so just trying to process, wherever a donor has an interest, I become kind of a bit of an expert in that particular area. So always reading through situation reports that come through, and trying to keep plugged in on what's happening in so many areas. It's all on top of the regular, work that we do. So we have to stay plugged in, or we become sort of irrelevant. We don't want to just be a vacuum cleaner salesman coming to the table. We have to come with information and help them to understand what the children are living through. They want to know.
Where are you off to next?
Am I off to next? Oh, not very exciting. Maybe the west coast of Florida.
Oh. Well, that's pretty exciting, but it's
yeah.
But not in the middle of an emergency yet. So
no, yeah, exactly. That all hands on deck for the emergencies. So it's getting out the communications about that is first and foremost. So yeah.
Thank you so much for this. If people want to learn more about your work, or even contact you, or certainly Save the Children, how best?
I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn would be probably good.
Okay. And Save the Children is obviously savethechildren.org here in the US. And I think all of the people who will be watching this are likely to be US people, but we do have occasionally people visit the videos from around the world, and there are Save the Children affiliated organizations, the other Save the Children sister organizations. I don't know what you're calling them, part of the alliance, the members of the alliance around the world. So all good organizations fighting for the same cause. So I hope you'll check them out online and check out Diana's work, maybe just by following her LinkedIn profile. So with that, I know we're going to close up today and close out our trip to Florida, but thank you for hanging out with us today. We appreciate you, and I hope that you'll join us for the programs coming up in the weeks ahead, especially 2 podcast episodes, which we will finally be dropping next week. All of that's available at the DonorSearch site at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, where you can see the schedule for all the things coming, as well as recordings of all the things that have been there recently, including a recording of this episode, which will be placed there probably later tonight. So with that, thanks again for hanging out with us. Thank you so much, Diana, for doing this. It's great to see you. Yeah.
Great to see you.
And we'll see you next time. Take care.